Something huge is coming in your life in the next 7 days. Not as a warning, as a delivery. Everything you survived was building toward this. Don't make the mistake of clicking away and passing by this important message. I am speaking to all 12 zodiac signs because each of you has a different instruction on how to make the most of this magical event. And before it arrives, before the most concentrated planetary event of the entire year fires into your chart and begins moving things that have not moved in years, there is one final test standing between you and what is coming. Something is going to show up in the next 48 hours that will try to pull you backward. A person, a pattern, a doubt so familiar it almost feels like home. And most people will not recognize it for what it is. They will respond to it with the same energy they always have and wonder why Thursday's new moon did not deliver what they were promised. That is not going to be you, because today you are going to understand the full architecture of what has been building above you since January. The 7-planet stellium that perfects tonight, the specific thing it is delivering to your life in the next week. The test that is coming before it arrives, and the precise feeling you are going to have in your body. Not as a concept when what has been building finally lands. Today you find out what this actually is. Comment. It was all building towards this below to open the energetic intention of your word to the universe. Because it's always listening. Let me show you something that most people will never see. Because most people experience their life as a series of disconnected events rather than as the coordinated sequence it actually is. Cast your mind back to February. Saturn and Neptune met at 0 degrees Aries, the rarest conjunction in nearly 2 decades. 2 planetary forces, one the builder of permanent structure and one the dissolver of everything false. Meeting at the exact beginning of the zodiac, the absolute ground zero of the astrological wheel. That was not a random transit. That was the foundation being poured. Then the eclipses. The karmic clearing. The forced endings that felt like losses and were actually removals. The universe taking out of your path everything that would have slowed down what was coming. Then Mercury retrograde pulling you backward through unfinished psychological territory because you cannot build forward on ground that has not been cleared of its old debris. Then April 9th, Mars entering Aries, the warrior returning home. Your motivation finally matching your direction for the first time in months. Then the fog of Monday, April 13th, burning away the last of the old picture. Tuesday's ignition. Wednesday's wound closing. Thursday's transmission arriving in the quiet. And today, the new moon fires at 27 degrees Aries inside a 7-planet stellium, and the sequence completes. None of that was random. Not one confused season. Not one difficult month. Not one moment where you wondered if any of it was leading anywhere. It was all leading here. The architecture was always there. You just could not see it from inside the construction. There were things this year that drained you in ways you could not fully explain to anyone. Not dramatic collapses. Quiet drains. The relationships you gave everything to that returned very little. The work you put in that went unacknowledged. The patience you maintained in situations that did not deserve that level of patience. The energy you directed toward people and places that were never going to move in your direction. You kept showing up anyway. Not because you were naive, because something in you understood that the account would eventually be settled by your life, rather than by any confrontation. Here is what nobody tells you about that. The energy did not disappear. Energy does not disappear. It converts. Every conversation that went nowhere built your discernment. Every situation that asked more of you than it returned built your endurance. Every season of invisible effort while the people around you seemed to be advancing built the specific kind of patience that does not run out at the critical moment. The patience that is still standing when 7 planets gather in one sign and the universe finally points everything in one direction at once. Mercury is sharper today because he spent years thinking through problems that had no easy answer. Mars is more focused because you learned the difference between effort that builds and effort that burns. Saturn is steadier because you survived seasons that required more of you than you thought you had. What drained you was not wasted. It was converted into the exact fuel this new moon needs to move what it came to move. And tonight it ignites. Let me give you the precise mechanics of what is happening tonight. Because once you understand the actual scale of this event, the weight of it stops feeling like pressure and starts feeling like permission. The new moon perfects at 27 degrees 28 minutes of Aries at 7:51 in the morning on April 17th. The Sun and Moon meet at that degree with Mercury at 3 degrees Aries, Mars at 6, Saturn at 7, Neptune at 2, and Chiron at 26. 7 planetary bodies in a single sign simultaneously, all of them pointing in the same direction at the same time with a new moon at their center. To understand what that actually means, you need to know how rarely it happens. The previous 7-planet Aries stellium was in 879 AD, over 1,000 years ago. The 2011 Aries stellium brought the Arab Spring. Governments that had stood for decades were gone within months. The January 2020 Capricorn stellium needs no explanation. Everyone alive remembers what that year initiated. A stellium of this concentration does not produce ordinary weeks. It produces turning points that people look back at years later and say that was when everything changed. And here is the detail that changes everything for you personally. All planets are currently in direct motion, not one retrograde in the sky. In astrological terms, this means the internal brake system of the collective has been released. No cosmic friction, no looking backward, no built-in delays. The intentions set under this new moon do not move through resistance the way they would in an ordinary lunation. They move through a slipstream. What is planted tonight grows without the usual obstacles slowing the first stages of its emergence. 7 planets, 0 retrogrades, 1 new moon. The most unobstructed initiatory window of the entire year opened tonight. And it opened for you. Most people spend years trying to remove the obstacles they can see. The wrong job, the difficult relationship, the financial pressure, the timing that never seems to align, and they work on those things, sometimes successfully, and then discover that the underlying pattern has not changed. A new version of the same dynamic appears in a different context with different people, because the obstacle they were removing was never the real one. The real one was invisible, and it was not external. Here is what was actually blocking you, not as a spiritual concept, as a precise diagnosis, somewhere in the formation of who you are. You absorbed a belief so quietly and so completely that it stopped feeling like a belief and started feeling like a fact. The belief that you are the kind of person things happen to rather than the kind of person things happen for. That the life you can feel is possible, is available to other people, people with different starting points, different histories, different levels of visible luck. That you, specifically, with your specific wound and your specific story, are somehow the exception to the rule that people who work this hard and survive this much eventually arrive somewhere real. That belief is the hidden wall. It has been running beneath every decision, every effort, every moment where the evidence was good, but the internal verdict was still not yet. Not quite. Not for someone like me. The 7-planet stellium tonight does not negotiate with that wall. It does not work around it or offer it a compromise. It applies 7 simultaneous planetary forces to a belief that was never the truth about you. And the wall comes down. Not because you finally found the right way to remove it, because you outgrew the need for it. There were moments where you could have responded with the same energy that was directed at you and chose not to. Not because you were afraid, not because you did not have the words, or the capacity, or the justified anger to deliver exactly what was deserved, but because something in you understood that the account would be settled by your life, not by a confrontation, not by a response that would have cost you more than if returned, by what you eventually became and what you eventually built while the people who underestimated you were standing still. That was not weakness. That was the longest play in the room, and it is paying off tonight. Every new moon in Aries carries the energy of fire, initiation, the burning away of what no longer belongs. But a new moon inside a 7-planet stellium with Chiron, Mars, and Saturn all present is not a gentle fire. It is the kind that reveals what is real by removing everything that was not. And here is what you need to understand about what survives it. The wound survives. Not as a liability, as a credential. The specific capacity built through the specific difficulty you lived through is not destroyed by this fire. It is clarified by it, stripped of the fear and the hesitation and the low ceiling of the old belief that has been sitting on top of it. What survives is the actual version of you, not the managed version, not the version edited for other people's comfort, the one that was being built underneath all of it the entire time. The energy you gave to the wrong people survives too. Converted, returned with interest, not by the people who took it, but by the universe that tracked every unit of it and has been compounding it quietly for years. Tonight the account closes, not at a deficit. Now the thing I need you to hear before we go into the sign-by-sign activations. In the next 48 hours, something is going to show up that will try to pull you backward. Not loudly, not dramatically, with the specific quiet of something familiar. A person reappearing who does not belong in the next chapter. A doubt surfacing that you thought you had already moved past. A pull toward a direction you already closed, dressed up in the language of maybe this time, or maybe I was wrong to let that go. It will feel almost reasonable. That is the test, not a punishment from the universe, not evidence that you are not ready or that the timing is wrong. The final signal from a frequency you have already outgrown, making one last attempt to remain relevant before the new moon permanently shifts your signal to something it cannot reach. The instruction is simple. You do not need to fight it. You do not need to respond to it with anger or with explanation or with the energy the old version of you would have brought to it. Simply name it internally for what it is, the last transmission from the old chapter, and let it pass without engagement. The portal does not require you to defeat the past. It only requires you to stop walking back into it. You have come too far and survived too much to spend the most powerful week of the year looking backward. The test is coming. Now you know what it is. The 7-planet stellium does not land the same way in every chart. What is specifically arriving in your life in the next 7 days, where it lands, and the one action that aligns you with it, is different depending on where this new moon falls in your world. Here is yours, Aries. The stellium is in your first house, your identity, your body, the core of who you are before anyone else's needs enter the picture. What happens in the next 7 days is a permanent recalibration of your relationship with your own authority, the version of you that needed external confirmation before acting, that softened its certainty so others could stand comfortably next to it, that made its conviction smaller so it was easier to explain. That version completes its final week of operation tonight. What replaces it is a self-trust so grounded it will surprise even you. Your action this week is one decision made with your own agreement only, not your partner's, not your mentor's. Yours alone. Make it and do not explain it. Taurus. The stellium activates your 12th house, the hidden realm, the subconscious, the underground where the real processing happens. What shifts this week is beneath the surface, and the most significant shifts often are. Something is completing in your shadow. Something is being released from a depth your rational mind cannot supervise or rush. On Sunday, when the sun enters your sign, that underground work emerges into light. Your job this week is to trust the process you cannot see. The confusion you might feel is not a problem. It is completion. Your action this week is to resist the urge to force visibility on what is still processing. Let the underground do its work. Gemini. Your 11th house of belonging, community, and soul-level connection is the active territory this week. What arises is a clarity about where you actually belong, not where you have been performing belonging, not where you have been useful or impressive or carefully managed, but where genuine recognition of the actual you exists without you having to engineer it. One connection either deepens significantly or completes in the next 7 days. Both outcomes are the new moon delivering what needed to move, Your action this week is to show up as the unedited version of yourself in one context. Notice who moves closer. That movement is the arrival. Cancer, Jupiter is in your sign, and it is amplifying every single thing the stellium activates in your 10th house of career, public mission, and the contribution you came here to make. What happens this week is professional, and it is visible. Something you have been building privately becomes impossible to keep private any longer. A recognition, an opportunity, a conversation that shifts the direction of your working life arrives, and it requires you to receive it without immediately questioning whether you earned it. You did. Your action this week is to stop managing how your work looks to people who are never going to champion it anyway. Let what is real speak for itself. Leo, your 9th house of vision, belief systems, and the philosophical ceiling on your life is where the new moon fires. The ceiling breaks this week, not with drama, as a quiet permanent expansion of what you allow yourself to want. The version of your future you stopped describing to people because it felt too large, too specific, too much to say out loud without feeling exposed. That version becomes the working intention from tonight. Your action this week is to write it down in its complete form. Not the edited version, the real one. Then leave it somewhere you will find it in 12 months. Virgo, your 8th house of deep transformation, psychological contracts, and the unconscious agreements governing your surface life, is the active wound tonight. What shifts this week is a dynamic. One specific relationship or exchange that has been structurally unequal either corrects itself or completes itself, and both outcomes are the same thing, dressed differently. Both are liberation. The new moon conjunct Chiron in this house is surgical in its precision. What has been hiding beneath the surface of a close connection becomes impossible to not see. Your action this week is to name what you see without the usual generous interpretation that protects someone else's comfort at the expense of your own clarity. Libra, the stellium falls in your 7th house, the most personally activating placement in your entire chart for this transit. Partnerships, one-on-one connections, the people who mirror you back to yourself. What arrives this week is either a significant deepening in an existing connection or the appearance of something entirely unlike what came before. And here is the specific thing Libra needs to hear about this week. The next connection that truly belongs in your life will not feel like the ones that drained you. It will not arrive with the intensity that used to feel like passion and turned out to be instability. It will feel calm, certain, like arriving somewhere rather than chasing something. Your action this week is to hold one boundary without explanation. That single act is the signal that tells the universe you are ready for what is calibrated to your actual frequency. Scorpio, your 6th house of daily life, physical body, and the invisible infrastructure of how you actually spend your energy is activated tonight. What changes this week is structural, a routine, a habit, a daily pattern that has been quietly extracting more from you than it returns either falls away naturally or becomes impossible to maintain at its current cost. Your body will know before your mind decides. Pay close attention to what produces relief this week rather than what produces productivity. The new moon is not asking Scorpio to work harder. It is asking you to work from the correct foundation. Your action this week is to identify one daily pattern that is costing more than it is building and make one specific change, not an overhaul, one change. Sagittarius, your 5th house of creative expression, authentic joy, and the unapologetic self ignites tonight. Something creative that has been circling without landing arrives complete in the next 7 days. A project, a direction, an expression that has been almost ready, moves into actual motion. The stellium in this house is a green light that is not just energetic but practical. The internal brake system that has been slowing the creative momentum. The voice that has been asking whether it is good enough or whether now is the right time is removed tonight by 7 simultaneous planetary forces all pointing at the same answer. Your action this week is to begin the thing you have been almost beginning, not the safe version, the actual one. Capricorn, your 4th house, the emotional foundation, the private world, The inner architecture of your life is where the new moon lands tonight. What shifts this week is intimate and internal. The gap between the life that appears correct from the outside and the life that actually feels like home begins to close. Not through dramatic external change, but through one honest acknowledgement of what you actually want your private life to feel like. That acknowledgement, made this week under a 7-planet stellium, is not a small thing. It is a seed planted in the most powerful initiatory lunation of the year, in the house that governs everything you protect most fiercely. Your action this week is to ask yourself one question you have been carefully not asking. Write the honest answer. Let it stand. Aquarius. Your third house of communication, voice, and the relationship between what you know privately and what you say publicly is the active territory tonight. What happens this week is a conversation, one specific exchange initiated by you or arriving unexpectedly that changes the direction of something significant. Mercury, Mars, Saturn, and Neptune are all gathered in your communication house simultaneously, and the words you choose this week carry more structural weight than they do in any ordinary week. What you say from this ground plants itself in the most concentrated cosmic moment of the year. Your action this week is to say the precise true thing in one context, where you have been saying the approximate true thing. The difference between those two versions is where the shift lives. Pisces, your second house of self-worth, material reality, and what you believe you deserve to receive, is where the new moon fires tonight. After the depth of this week's transmissions, after the Mercury-Neptune channel on Wednesday and the Chiron wound closing on Thursday, the new moon in Pisces' second house delivers the grounding. What shifts this week is your relationship with your own value. Something arrives, an offer, a recognition, an opportunity that requires you to receive it without immediately negotiating the amount downward or questioning whether you deserved it. The practice this week is the simplest and hardest one on this entire list. Receive it completely, without editing what arrives to a size that feels safer. Before the close, I want to stay here for a moment. Your nervous system is registering something today that your mind is still catching up to. Not anxiety, not the restlessness of something unresolved, a different quality entirely. A specific aliveness at the edges of thought. The physical sensation of something that has been held in suspension for a very long time, finally releasing into motion. That is not your imagination. That is 7 planets in one sign, firing simultaneously through your system and your body recognizing, before your conscious mind has fully processed it, that something real is happening. The comments coming in on this week's videos have been something I want to acknowledge directly and genuinely. The depth of what people have been sharing, the honesty, the number of people describing things they have never said out loud before, tells me exactly what kind of community has been gathering here across this week. This is not a comment section. It is a specific frequency of people who feel things at a depth the ordinary world does not have language for. Who sense the shift before it arrives, who refuse to accept that the life they can feel as possible is somehow not available to them. If you are new here and you have not subscribed, do it now. Because what the new moon initiates tonight does not complete in a single video. What is planted this week requires context for the days that follow. Drop your zodiac sign in the comments below. Let me tell you something that most astrology content will never tell you. The thing that is coming for your life in the next 7 days will not arrive the way you expect it to. It will not feel like winning. It will not arrive with a fanfare or a sudden dramatic reversal of everything that has been difficult. It will not announce itself as the moment you have been building toward. The most significant shifts in a human life almost never do. Here is how you will know it when it comes. You will notice it first in your body. A release of something you have been holding without fully realizing you were holding it. A specific quality of settled certainty that is different from excitement, different from relief, different from the temporary high of a good day. It is quieter than all of those things and more permanent than any of them. The specific physical sensation of moving in the correct direction, and the correct direction being the one you were always supposed to be walking. The low-level dread that has been running in the background of every almost good moment, The quiet voice that said not yet, or not quite, or not for someone like you, will simply not be there, not silenced, not defeated, gone. The way a sound you have been hearing so long you stop noticing it is suddenly absent, and the silence it leaves behind feels like the most natural thing in the world. That is the arrival, and when it comes, when you feel that specific quality of rightness landing in your body quietly and completely, I want you to remember this moment, this video, this week, the sequence that built it, the fog of Monday and the ignition of Tuesday, and the wound that closed on Wednesday and the transmission that arrived on Thursday. Remember that none of it was random. Remember that everything you survived was building toward exactly this. And if you are still here, still watching, I genuinely appreciate you more than you know, not casually. Genuinely, the fact that you stayed through all of it, through the entire week and the entire sequence and all the way to this moment, tells me something precise about what you are ready for. Drop your sign below. The portal is open. The sequence is complete. Begin.